Hi everybody! Happy Valentine's Day! Today we're going to be making a Celtic triskele necklace like this. You can also customize this with any shape or pattern, and it makes a great gift for Valentine's Day if you're looking for something. So let's get into it! I'm starting off with this maple branch. The wood has had plenty of time to cure. Make sure that you use fully dried wood to prevent it from splitting or warping. I chose maple because the hardwood polishes up beautifully. It's also durable, and the smooth grain makes it much easier to burn later. I'm using a double-edged pull saw here. This tool gives me plenty of control, which I will definitely need since the slices of wood are so thin. I cut the disc about 4 mm thick. A thicker wood circle wouldn't be as comfortable, and it's not the look I'm going for. Since they're so thin, I make a backup just in case. Then I sand everything smooth using a detail sander. Sanding by hand would take much longer for this hard wood, and a belt sander would be a bit overpowered for the small pieces. I start with a rough grit sandpaper, then progress to a finer grit until I work up to a nice fine polish. It kind of looks like my sander has a smiley face on it. For comparison, this is the difference between the rough side and the side that I just finished. Next, I pick out a tiny drill bit the right size for the hardware I'm using, and I take my time drilling the hole because small bits can be delicate and I'm using a harder wood, so I let the drill do the work and I try not to rush. Since this piece is so narrow, I also take care to drill as close to 90 degrees as possible to avoid coming out the side of the wood, and then I double check the depth to make sure I drilled deep enough. It's looking good, so I start adding the hardware. I start by screwing the eye screw in by hand. This can be a bit tedious, but editing helps. Once it's nice and tight, I add a connecting ring and pinch it shut with some pliers. I will be threading this with a suede string. I did my best to match the color with the color of the bark for a cohesive look. Here's what it looks like with the hardware installed. Now that the pendant is complete, I'll be tracing out my design. I sized it on my phone, turned the brightness way up, and put a piece of paper over the top. Then I traced it with a pen. I freehand my designs the majority of the time, but this design was so symmetrical, I decided the safest bet would be to trace it to get as close to perfect as possible. When it was done, I cut the design out to the size I needed and taped it right to the pendant. Then I got right to work, burning the shape onto the pendant. I decided to burn right through the paper and into the wood. Now I'm using a thin nib to get the basic shape sketched in. This gives me a lot of room for error and lets me fix up any mistakes I make. I find holding the pen still and turning the wood helps to get a smooth curve on the spirals. I noticed there was some give in the pen and took a moment to tighten the screws to hold the nib in place. These can sometimes loosen with the temperature change, but in my case, I don't think I tightened it all the way. Take care not to burn your fingers. These pens are very hot, and on a small piece like this, there's not a lot of room to work. I had a bit of trouble with this part because the tape broke or burned, and the paper started shifting when I was trying to work on it. I resolved this by holding it still and carefully continuing the pattern. Once the pattern was finished, I removed the paper. Then I started going back over my work to tidy the lines up a bit. This is a fun project that you can easily do in a couple of hours. It may take a bit longer if you need to find the materials, but most or all of the supplies can be found at a craft store. I've even seen pre-cut wood circles, so if you need a gift for a special someone on Valentine's Day, this is your sign to make them a necklace. I promise they'll be impressed. Sometimes a handmade gift from the heart just means more, and you can customize this design to be really meaningful. Once I've gone over all the lines, I'm left with this rough shape. I plan on going over it later with a wider nib to smooth everything out. But first I do a quick sand to remove any discoloration from burning, or any small errors that have occurred. Next I change out my nib for a much thicker option. This will give the design a polished look, and the bold lines will give the necklace more visual impact. I take extra care to make sure the screws are secure before I begin. Looks good to me! In this step, I followed the lines I already burned, and let the rounded shape of the nib smooth out any rough edges. This step may not be necessary depending on how happy you are with the finished result. But for me, I personally like the precision of the smaller tool to begin with, and the smooth, bold lines of the wider tool at the end. If it works for you, then it's the right way to do it. With the pattern complete, all that's left is to string the necklace. I begin by cutting the suede to length. Since this isn't for me, I'm going to leave a lot of extra length so it can be trimmed to the perfect length later. Then I tie a nice secure knot. Then I trim off the ends as close as I can to the knot. This keeps things tidy looking. You can see here that the string has crimps from the way it was packaged. To resolve this, I'll simply take the necklace and hang it with other items hanging from the end. The additional weight will help straighten out the kinks. Kinda like this. Thanks, Gravity. Now it's all finished and here's how it looks. Thanks for watching. Bye!